Hello, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Myths, Mastering Not-for-Profit Technology Strategies. I'm Alex Gorel, your host for today's session, and I'm thrilled to have each of you joining us. Throughout the next hour, we'll be exploring how to enhance your organization's technological capabilities. Whether you're here to gain insights, expand your knowledge, or simply be curious about the subject matter, I'm confident you'll find today's discussion both engaging and informative. Before we get started, a few quick housekeeping notes. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A and we'll address them at the end of the session. Keeping this a bit interactive, we've included a poll and appreciate your participation. And you'll also receive a copy of the slides and access to the recording. Now, without further ado, let's jump right in. I'd like to introduce you to Jerry McGlynn, our practice director for not-for-profit and consulting.
Great, thanks, Alex. Welcome, everybody. Good morning, and hope everybody's having a great day today. We're excited to share the results of 2 years of strategy roadmap work with our not-for-profit customers, with all of you, some of the findings that we've got, and a few recommendations that we've made to them and would like to share with all of you this morning as well. So joining me here on this call are two of my consultants, Manan Thacker and Elisa Groom. Both were integral in the analysis that we performed over the last couple of years. So as we move forward in the material here, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to cover today, right? So we will talk about 5 myths and the realities that we've discovered in talking with the not-for-profit community. We're going to ask a quick little series of questions for all of you to share the information that you have with you, and a couple of case studies, and then an offer for an assessment program to allow some of you to take advantage of the work that we've done with our not-for-profit customers. So a little bit of grounding here. We as we put this material together, we wanted to seek some outside input to help kind of confirm some of the findings that we found. And so we've assembled this information here, but this information by itself is not necessarily the extent of the analysis we want to share, right? We actually want to ask all of you some questions and seek some of your feedback. So we put a little questionnaire together that should be popping up on your screen right now. We're going to give you a minute to look through there and answer those questions, but also share some of what we found here. So what you're seeing in front of you are some examples from attendees of the expert panel at Forbes Council. Not-for-profits are starting to realize that they are technology organizations as well. They are leaning into new technology and innovation. And I think we're going to highlight a couple of these in our case studies coming up. Artificial intelligence, right? This is, a year, 2 years ago, business intelligence was the common theme question about how do we get more into that. Back half of 23 and into 2024, artificial intelligence has become the dominating conversation. So we have a few recommendations here on how to get started with that. And then lastly, one of the things that we were really encouraged to see the last 2 items here, because it really did align with our own research, that having the ability to demonstrate the return on investment of what you're doing with technology helps it helps refine the plan for technology, but also makes it easier to get the funding that everybody's seeking right there. And then lastly, diversification. Every organization's focused on that right now, and having that information, having your systems able to handle different revenue streams is going to be essential. So, great results here coming up. Limited budgets, legacy systems. Those are going to be 2 things we're going to talk about in detail. So I think the timing of your answers is fantastic. So thank you very much for that. And we'll use that as a lead in to myth number 1. So myth number 1, and I think this speaks to the comments that some of you have made about legacy items, and then just the overall thought process that we put in this technology and it needs to last for indefinite period of time. And and we've heard that argument from a couple of different perspectives. In some cases, people have said it as asking for help and how to get things justified, to get things approved. In other cases, they've said it as almost as a badge of success, that, look, we've got this 15-year-old system and it's working great. Why do we need to get rid of it? And the reality of what we found, and this is kind of where, I'm going to hand off to Manan and Elisa. Manan, why don't we, start with you in regards to technical debt and, some of the longstanding systems. And then Elisa, if you can jump in on the utilization, because you definitely led the charge on a few of those items.
Thanks, Jerry. No, I think that's just piggybacking on what's mentioned in the polls, that budget is definitely going to be a concern. And one of the reasons why budget is a concern, because many a times we observe that the reliance on the older technology is something that's been used for quite some time. And I can take an example where we have worked in a system which was developed on Visual Basic. Now that's been running for 17 years. It was absolutely running fine, but then the bigger concern is that the debt was so high that the servers that were being used were literally out of spec. Those were not supported. The security was a major concern. And then that something was translated into that, how do we reduce the technical debt? How do we ensure that the servers or the systems that we are trying to use are being optimized in a way so that the lifespan of the hardware is being taken care into consideration, the overall infrastructure is being supported. Now, those are some of the things that we observed, and I'll let Elisa to chime in here in terms of how the governance has made a difference and how do we overcome some of those challenges.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, when we come into an organization that has a lot of old tools, and we see low utilization of those tools themselves. It's not that the process isn't happening, right? It's that organizational processes are being driven outside of those key tools. And so when we start to get requests for things like better reporting and visibility into the organization, we're not able to easily get to that data to provide the visibility and to provide some of the planning for management teams and executives and the board. So that's one challenge. I think the other consideration for low utilization of tools is it begins to create this cycle of what we call tribal knowledge. And that is, the more process that exists outside of an organizational critical application, the harder it is to pass that process knowledge and maintain that process if a person leaves or moves to a new role. And so as we approach these assessments, particularly in the not-for-profit space, we really focus on how governance is managed between IT and organizational leadership. Because generally we find that there's a disconnect in what IT is able to provide, whether it be budget limitations or additional deprecated infrastructure that needs to be managed first, and what the business actually needs. And so, our primary recommendation here, and what will be a common theme throughout this entire discussion today, is having a firm governance program in place where we involve both IT decision makers and organizational decision makers to really focus on where technology will have the biggest impact to the organization. That's going to be, the most impactful thing a CIO could do within the organization.
Yeah, thank you. That's good. I think, pulling both of these items back towards the answers that we got in regards to limited budgets and utilization and technical debt, I've found that they all go hand in hand. So one of the common themes that we found with the low utilization is that there are solutions, hardware, software, you name it, that people are spending a significant portion of their budget on. But when you look at the solution and how much the organization is using of that solution, we're finding that there are organizations spending six figures on licensing for software that they're using maybe 10 to 15% of that solution. And they're spending sums of money, duplicative sums of money on other applications that could be done with the app that they already own. So that's kind of where it all comes back into the governance program and the development of annual operating plans. So by becoming, business managers along with being technological leaders and using a governance program to your advantage, right? You're able to lay out the year in advance, and you're able to say, this is what we're going to focus on in regards to technical debt, right? There's no quick way out of having technical debt. You have to unwind it. But what you will find is that over time, as you start to unwind it, you kind of have the reverse snowball effect, right? So over time, you're accumulating the technical debt. The snowball is getting bigger and bigger. What's going to happen is that as you start to unwind the technical debt, you're going to find over time, you're going to shrink it much, much quicker as you start to put things in place. And so, in the example that Manan had mentioned, that particular organization, could operate at probably 50 to 60% fewer servers than what they were operating on. But because of that technical debt load, they were forced to stay in an on-premise footprint and not able to go make a move to cloud, which is really kind of slowing down some of the cost issues that they were running into. So again, all of this stuff is tightly intertwined, but it leads us to the second myth. And so one of the myths that we've heard out there is that, we'd love to do some of these items, but modern technology, it's not affordable. We can't, we can't get that shiny object, or some of these things are out of our ability to spend. And in which case, people will opt to go and build some of these things themselves and run into issues with it. But what we found, and about 6 weeks ago, we spent some time up in Seattle with Microsoft and their technology for their tech for nonprofit organization. And one of the things we discovered is that last year alone, they donated over $4.3 billion in discounted technology. And as we bring on new customers into our organization, one theme that we find is that sometimes they are not properly registered with Microsoft, so they're not getting those benefits. So definitely, we're recommending regular audits with all of your service providers. Ask the question: am I getting my nonprofit entitlements that are available to me, or my grants, right? Ask those questions. Part of what we're offering with our Quick Start Roadmap program is we will help you do that and show you how to do that with your Microsoft environment to make sure you're getting the most of your spend. The other thing we do find is that many of the top shelf technology platforms are now having competitively priced platforms specifically for the nonprofit sector. So again, I think from that standpoint, it is it's advisable to go in and actually do things like RFPs, put that in front of them, let them do the legwork for you so that you're making, the most well-informed decision that you possibly can. I'm going to defer back to, Manan and Elisa on this one again. When we talk about manual processes, I think one of the things we see is that, with the step in of technology, how easy it is to pull software solutions down off the internet these days, oftentimes companies don't think about automation, and that becomes a bit of a problem. So Manan and Elisa, what have you guys discovered in some of the research that we've done?
Talking about the manual process, that's an interesting topic, because many times when we talk to the executives or the department, the actual users, they feel that just adding another staff member or adding people is the way to get around some of the needs that they have, and ignoring the technology aspect of it, because they always feel that going with an IT or going to the technology provider and asking them for a platform or something, that's going to cost us, if not millions, at least thousands of dollars. Now, what we figured is that some of the things like, let's say, invoice automation, we have seen that the organization was just having 25 people in their accounts department just to process the invoices, or just turn around with the grants that they need to do the reporting, etc. Now, some of those things can very well be automated with some of the very affordable technology available out there with Microsoft. Let's say all the robotic process automation tools are available out there, which can be easily integrated. If we talk about solution, which is where you need to just download the data from one system and upload to another one, where many a times we have seen that there are Excel dumps that we have been taken care of, and then there are manual data cleansing and the matching of different numbers out there. you need to do a lot of reporting for the grant purpose, or let's say you have to send some of the invoices to your funders. At that time, we have seen that the heavy use of Excel is there. I'm not saying Excel is not good. It's a great tool, but I think the hours that is spent on a month-on-month basis for these kind of activities can easily be reduced by just deploying some software, which is not even taking a month's time. So just imagine that how cheap, not just it's in terms of licensing, but also in terms of implementation with all the low-code, no-code platforms that are available out there in market. This can be easily achieved. So I give this one
Thank
example,
you.
but I'll let Elisa share some more insight on that.
Yeah, Elisa, how about you? I mean,
Yeah.
what did you and I specifically worked on a couple that I'd love to hear you talk about.
Yeah, I think I've got a couple of examples in mind. One is a nonprofit based in New York City, and another is a religious organization based in California. And in both of those examples, they were choosing not to implement centralized technologies, right? So modern enterprise-wide technology. And as such, we started to see a lot of small technologies implemented or Excel processes implemented. And I'll just focus on the results here for a minute of our, planning and assessment phases. When we looked at the technology portfolio and process portfolio across the organization, we found that in both cases, if these organizations were to move forward with a more modern, integrated technology portfolio, they would actually save labor for 3 to 5 full-time employees. And whether those FTEs are then directed to more mission-oriented work, or whether they choose to recognize that as cost savings, it's still enabling the mission in a way that older technologies and choosing not to invest in these technologies just cannot do.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. I think, and in that particular use case example, it actually is a good segue into one of our next myths, and that was the analytics. So in this particular case, the customer came to us because they were trying to drive a new analytics program, and they were having an issue, right? The analytics themselves were the data was lagged coming into their analysis environment. It was being hand built on a monthly basis, and once a month was as accurate or as frequent as they could make the data. And that was the a little bit of the findings that we've had up there, right? And in other cases, there were multiple parts of the organization that had chosen their own tool. And again, that siloed approach is what we find is something that's competing for the organization to be more effective and efficient with the use of technology, right? So what we found is, number one, not having that strategy up front that dictates how everybody will come together. Maybe it's the definition of data, or it's the use of tools, or the way in which the data is going to flow. All of those things all play into being able to handle analytics. And like I said at the beginning of the presentation, you can actually replace the word analytics with AI, which it's the same thing that's going on right now. The manual processing that you do today within your organization is definitely going to play against you. And again, we see this happening in both our for-profit and our not-for-profit customers. They're struggling with both of these items right here. So again, I think when you can do the planning up front. So let's talk about the solutions for a second, right? I think when you're putting a new system in, you have to go in realizing that interfaces are essential. If analytics is going to be part of your organization, you have to think about the flow of data from one system to the next. They can't be, operating in their own ecosystem, because you're going to have to move that data. And if you do it manually, it's going to be delayed, and there's going to be inaccuracies introduced into your environment. The discussion of analytics, right? We've talked a little bit about governance, but in our vernacular, when we talk about governance programs for organizations, very, very quickly, we talk about governance is not about saying no. Governance programs within technology are all about saying yes to more things and being successful with all of the yeses that we give out there. So analytics, AI, technical debt. These are all topics that need to be recurring conversations in your governance meetings. Having the business leadership alongside the technology leadership within the organization working through these issues, because these are definitely organization-wide issues. They need to be a recurring topic. And I think, if you even just think back into the news, more and more we are finding examples of companies in the news have had bad events recently that you can point the finger back to accumulation of technical debt as being one of the root causes there. And again, I think one other question we got along the way here was, how can an organization go about getting this stuff started? How can an organization be a master of analytics and then a master of artificial intelligence? And oh, by the way, I still have to be really good with all those other business applications, and I have to have a cyber program and all of these things. And what we advise with all of our customers is that it's 2024. Every organization is an enterprise technology company. And so what do you do when you don't have the budget to have 5 separate arms of your IT organization focused on analytics and artificial intelligence and cyber and all these other things? Well, you need to form strong partnerships. And every organization makes use of third parties to help them cover the areas where they are not going to focus on that part of technology as a core competency. So, there are a lot of solutions out there. I think, usually a conversation we have when we're spinning up a governance operation is we talk about what are the core competencies of your organization, right? Where does IT have to be unique and tailored to your needs of the organization? And then how do you supplement with partnerships along the way to help you get the rest of the way there so that you don't feel like you have to go it alone? So those are definitely, strong recommendations that we've got there about not just analytics and AI, but all aspects of technology. So let's lead us into myth number 4, spending. This is one we included this particular myth originally, and we spent a lot of time talking with different leaders at the Tech for Social Impact event up in Seattle with Microsoft. And we asked a lot of the leaders to give us their feedback on this particular item. We wanted to let that group kind of influence the information that we had collected along the way to figure out, again, were we on track, or were we just seeing just a couple of patterns in our own data? And some of the things we had heard coming in was very specific rules from funders on how spending can happen. Maybe because of that the budgets are parceled out differently, and so there are certain parts of the organization or certain parts of your mission who have better funding and therefore have better technology than others. And how do we go ahead and deal with that? And I think, one of the things we had talked about originally, and this was the feedback we got, was, do we need to put more structure into, how and where the money goes? And that was a positive feedback that we got. Definitely is when IT or any technology organization can start speaking the language of the business and be able to talk about things like return on investment. So here are all the costs going into a project, or here are all the costs going into a piece of technology that we need to operate, and here are the net benefits that are provided. And you can put that into the form of some kind of a ROI or an IRR type of calculation. You're now talking with the business on its language, as opposed to saying, I need a new switch or a firewall or this tool or that tool. This becomes, a very powerful tool for all technology leaders to say, are we getting the fullest benefit out of the technology spend that we've got? I personally have been part of projects before where, as I'm working with my customer on the project, they'll give me the concept, we'll sketch it up, and I've set projects back to the customer a couple of times to say, look, this is the bar, right? This is where your organization has set the bar for value for your particular projects, and your project is just not there. So we need to go back and we need to think about, what are the benefits to the organization? Are we going to pull costs out, or are we going to help more people? Are we going to increased donations, right? You know, what are going to be those tangible items that is going to drive the value into this particular project and therefore benefit the whole organization? And I think the minute IT starts having that level of dialogue, you start getting a real different focus on the projects, right? The projects then become about delivering technology solutions that add value. And when you can go back to your funders and talk about how this particular effort drove this value, the money, getting the money becomes, you know, you're still going to have to go through the exercise of making the request, but you'll find the conversation and the iterations it takes to get approval will start to come down, right? Who are your partners out there, Elisa and Mon? And let's talk. I'd love to hear from both of you, because both of you have had really strong partnerships with the C-suite and CFOs in particular. So let's talk about that partnership that the two of you have experienced along the way.
I think the funding is definitely one of the major point whenever it comes to spending, whether on a technology or how do we ensure that, and is it something governed by the program or is it something more from an holistic organization technology upliftment? So whenever we encounter those situations, I'll take a specific example of one of the customer that we are working for, had this different technology system that they have purchased. Now, when making those decisions, there's where, so HRIS system was kind of deployed, just keeping in mind that there are licenses that we are buying and we are not thinking about how will it be supported. And then there was this analytics platform which was deployed, which was not talking to some of the key department like finance. Now, what is happening is there, because of the imbalance funding that we have seen, where the planning was not appropriately done, and we could literally see the gaps. And when we did the assessment of the overall technology footprint and how the spending gets done, we could see the clear gaps. Now, how this is happening? Because there was a lack of partnership between the IT and CFO. And that's one of the points that we have seen, that when CFO start focusing on how the technology spend is done, and when the technology is more transparent with the finance and with the leadership, that is going to be very valuable in terms of a longer run, that they can make not just the strategic spend, but also in terms of how to run the organization and making sure that those kind of OPEX are also being specced out and the budget is considered. And then ultimately you deliver what is available. So, and that is kind of tightly integrated with how the overall budgeting exercise is done. And then many a times we have seen that we have also participated in the budgeting exercise with our customer as well, that we can help them in defining what should be the technology roadmap and what should be their next year and next 3 years of spending that would look like. So that's kind of we have seen so far. Elisa, anything that you would like to add?
Yeah, I think, the most successful partnerships I've had with executives when it comes to financial management for IT is when we bring a high level of visibility into where technology spending is actually going. There's a lot of instances, especially in a SaaSified world, where it's very easy to procure new technologies at the departmental level. And so what an executive might see from a budget for tech spend and what we as consultants might see as the overall tech spend for an organization can vary drastically. And bringing that visibility, starting to hone in on what technology spending actually looks like for the organization as a whole, and focusing on what's going to drive the most value, whether that be implementing new technologies or remediating technical debt and issues in supporting infrastructure, having a clear view of the budget and a defined planning phase to ensure we're getting the right initiatives into a budget early, have been really successful in then executing on an IT program that delivers tangible results to the business.
Yeah, I think, I think, drilling into the spend analysis for a second, I think is beneficial for everybody here. The way we recommend this and the way I've done it several times with our customers here is we do the spend analysis from kind of 2 points of view. Point of view number one is, the obvious one, right? Let's go into the accounts payable system and let's drop every invoice out from every vendor that could be a technology partner, and we'll start to understand what cost centers are procuring that technology, what's the spend amount, et cetera, right? The typical analysis. But the other one, and this is the one again in 2024, and this has been growing over time, that becomes a really interesting additional lens into technology spend, is if we go into the expense report, expense management platform, and we start to say, okay, let's pull the line items out of the expense reports that represent technology sector spending. And this is where your Dropboxes and your boxes and your Adobes and extra Zooms. This is, all of a sudden you're going to realize that you have data going into, 4 different cloud file sharing programs, and you might have 3 different video conferencing solutions. And when you can pull all that together and you can start to say, now I've got real levers of change that I can go forward with, right? Can I go and get rid of 2 different video conferencing platforms and focus just in on one? What can I do, not just from a cyber perspective, but what can I do from a data quality perspective by getting rid of all these external file sharing platforms? And if I free that money up, what could the organization be doing with it elsewhere? So, again, I think when you put the hat of a business person on and start having those conversations about, the spend overall and kind of where those investments start to go, and you look at this as a multi-year exercise, right? That, every year I'm going to replace a certain number of desktops. I can now get ahead of some of these items because, what we've seen time again is that everybody's always kind of chasing the last, 20% of the PC population when an OS is going out of date, right? But if we could proactively manage that fleet over the course of 3 to 4 to 5 years, you're going to make some of those projects, some of that spend on these efforts going to become less and less of an issue. But it will force the technical debt conversation, right? Because a lot of times people will say, well, we're stuck on this version of laptop because of this legacy business application. Well, let's talk through that, because again, by not dealing with these technical debt issues, all we're doing is we're postponing the inevitable diving catch that's going to have to be done into the future. Okay. All right. So this is actually now the second time we've done this presentation. First one was very popular, and with the second one, we thought we would bring this content forward and drop a new one in based upon some of the questions that we got along the way. And this one came in, and the question was, how do we get moving, right? There were many participants on the call who were maybe not technology professionals, and they liked what they heard, and they said, how do we get things moving? The myth is that it's just IT's business to keep these systems up to date or keep things moving or make these decisions. And really, an organization is operating at its best when these technology decisions become more of a team sport, right? So what we've heard is that, IT's not moving fast enough. Well, typically they're covering a lot of different bases. So how do we figure out how to have discussions on where we should be? Wanting to look at things like AI, but unsure how to move forward, right? And prior attempts struggling with how do we manage and move things forward. So I think, again, Amon and Elisa, one of the 2 of you guys, the 2 of you really collaborated on this particular slide. So let's talk a little bit about what the 2 of you have found in regards to how making technology evolution happen quicker can become more of a team sport than just waiting for IT to get to that on the checklist.
Elisa, why don't you take a lead on this?
Yeah, I think it's important to call out that, and like we say here, processes will adapt despite technology, and despite, current projects that are in flight. So the organization will adapt based on organizational needs, and whether technology supports that or not is really dependent on the governance structure and the partnership between the organization and IT. I think many of the challenges that I've seen, because in, my role, I interact with end users, management level and then executive level leadership. And many of the challenges I've seen is when an individual in the organization has a hard time with a specific technology, they generally have a hard time figuring out where to go with that as well, right? Identifying the right person to speak to start making change. And so that is, for me, when I speak with end users and with organizations as a whole, that's a big part of what I do is start to understand, well, who are the decision makers here? Who's driving change? And how can we start to engage these individual technology needs into a cohesive program? And so, if we look at the solutions here, I think the clear decision-making framework is a big one. And the way that that's implemented for an organization is really dependent on your culture, right? Your ability to support technology needs internally versus with partnerships, and so many other factors. And so creating those acceptable boundaries for engagement where individuals or teams can bring their technology problems to IT leadership or business leadership and start to make them known is, a critical step in identifying the most important focus points for an organization from an IT perspective. And that's really because we don't know what's most important until we know all the challenges and all the gaps that exist within that organization.
Great. Mana, anything you want to include there?
Just one specific example to what this meet is all about that I've come across. So there was a person who was working into the finance department. He was the accounts payable executive, and that guy was really kind of worried in terms of how do I ensure that we are not having a say in terms of what sort of technology is being chosen, or how we want to see that nowadays a lot of people are talking about AI, this chat GPT and the Copilot that's coming from Microsoft, but our IT is still focusing on making sure that some of the patches are right, or some of the OS updates are being done properly or not. So there was not a real visibility in terms of that. And what we eventually figured out that it's actually the technology is helping the business. It's not something that technology dictates how the business should be done. It is something which is an enabler, and that IT department is more of a facilitator. And we could actually get into a workshop where they come up with all the requirements, and eventually IT was there to support what kind of requirements that business had. And that's how it was something that it's not just that coming from an IT that starting today, you all will be using Microsoft Copilot or you all will be using Power BI. It's more in terms of what makes more sense, how collaboratively everybody can work together and what satisfies everyone's need. And that has come up with this kind of workshop. And that's where I think the planning workshop are more in terms of how do we leverage technology to best increase the overall productivity, or in case of analytics, how do we become a data-driven organization? So that's just one example that I want to quote.
That's great. I think, maybe the way I'll kind of close this slide out was, Manan, was something that you had just said, right? Is having that discussion, having that dialogue. I've often found the most effective IT technology governance organizations that I've participated in have been the groups where it really is considered a team exercise, where you have active participations from all sides of the business, and everybody's collectively trying to figure out how to get the needs of the organization met, and how maybe each sub-organization themselves needs to adapt as they go forward. So as we get out of these myths, let's talk about a couple of places where we've seen this come into play. And as I look at some of the questions that have been submitted there from the attendees, one of them was, how do we move forward with AI? Are there any good examples of nonprofits who are starting to do this? And I think that when I think about this first use case that we have here, Shop Goodwill, If you have not had a chance to go to that site, I definitely encourage you to go there. I think it's one of these places where you could find yourself losing several hours quite easily just shopping around and seeing what's out there on their website. This is an organization that we helped do a cloud transformation work as they were going through their own issues of technical debt. But where they're at right now, if you think about how a typical e-commerce operation works, is that there's a pretty straightforward product catalog that moves from the planning systems into the e-commerce site, and that product catalog, the data, the metadata, the attributes associated with the product can be enriched with the tools that the organization has. But in the case of Goodwill, they're processing all of that material in their depots, and they have individuals who are taking pictures of the product that you'll see on the website. They're adding the pricing information and the product attributes, so that when you search for a product, you're going to get the thing that you're looking for. And they've definitely seen that is a potential bottleneck for them getting more product up onto the Shop Goodwill landscape. So they are actually going through an exercise right now to see if they can use AI to take pictures of the products, type those pictures right into Copilot, have Copilot interrogate that picture, those photographs, and come up with some of the key attributing that would be essential for the product search. And so we're really excited to see what Shop Goodwill comes forward with partnership with Microsoft, and definitely we're excited about that one.
Jerry, you're on mute.
So Mana and Elisa, can the two of you guys talk about the other two case studies?
Yep. I'll quickly talk about the one that is on the last end of this slide on the right-hand side, which is about the healthcare organization. So they came to us with a peculiar requirement of starting with some of the analytics that they want to do. They tried their hands on some of the tools that are available out there, but they were not kind of making the decisions that they wanted to do. They had a lot of paper-based processes. The data collection was kind of, people were not used to with using the technology, and we have seen that there were literally the paper forms of assessment of some of the patients were being handed over, and there was a complete army of people who were just there to do the digital entry of the data, and then based on that there was certain reporting that needs to be prepared, and almost half of the month was spent on just preparing those reports that needs to be submitted at the end of the month. And it was taking, they were basically 2 weeks delayed, and that translated to some of the grants coming in late for them as well. So we implemented some of the solutions with that. So we implemented the central data warehouse for them with all the different sources. The data started coming in. They were also been able to generate some of the reports quite swiftly. There were persona-based dashboards that we created, and a lot of KPIs were put in place. And that has attributed to some of the productivity gains that we have seen. Nearly 600 plus hours of overall time every month that we have seen has been improved. Overall, not a month, but on a weekly basis, they have significant increase in terms of their overall revenue because of that. I would say 4% revenue increase just on the basis of a decision that was made on the technology selection, implementation, and adoption. So that's how it has benefited. And sometimes it's difficult to identify tangible benefits, but here in this case of this particular customer, we did the cost analysis that Lisa referred earlier. We could really get some licensing optimized because of that as well. So at many different fronts, and that's how we do a consultative approach of all this kind of cases, where we come up with what is right for them and how do we make sure that the technology organization is matured enough so that they start reaping the benefit of the modern technology that we implement.
Great. All right. Elisa, how about you?
Yeah, I think to end on the middle one, this organization came to us with a old housing administration app. So they were focused on assigning people in need to long-term and short-term housing. And they had a couple of issues with this application that were not only impacting operations within the app, but also the organization's ability to recognize funding and assign funding to specific programs. So this was more than just a a process challenge or a technology challenge, but this was deeply impacting the organization and their ability to operate. So they came to us with compliance concerns. In general, the process for assigning their community members to housing was not scalable. And they were forced to rely on manual processes to drive those processes forward, which is very challenging to do, especially because this organization was operating in California, where homelessness and people in need during COVID especially were increasing significantly. And then just to end on their issues, the reporting processes were heavily manual and they were inaccurate, and that tended to perpetuate their challenges in assigning and managing their funding. So we took a twofold approach for this solution, and not only did we enhance the existing application, but we took a step back and looked at the portfolio as a whole and really the whole value stream for assigning people to housing and then recognizing those funds and managing it long term. And we developed a program to enhance the existing application. We wanted to improve the overall community self-service capabilities, but then also developed automation processes to reduce the manual data processing and improve accuracy for that work stream. And the ultimate outcome was an integrated application ecosystem where business applications were supporting the organization rather than the other way around. And ultimately, what we saw as a direct impact to this was the ability to process over 8,000 applicants to housing placements. And as a part of that, the distribution of 50 million in funding. And then what we saw is, a longer term outcome is the increased visibility for financial and operational reporting.
Oh, that's great. All right. So moving right along here, a common question we get is, how do we get going on this? What can we start to do? Now, most of the case studies that you've just heard about are those are engagements that were 8 to 10 week long, where we do really deep dives on process and focus on systems integration and making recommendations for a multi-year roadmap. A lot of people just want to get started right away with how do we get a sense as far as what our opportunity looks like. And so what we've come up with here is a very short 1 week engagement where we go through the exercise that you see listed here in the chevrons. It begins with a free 60-minute technology discussion where we're gonna talk with you real quickly, understand your problems, your issues. We will send you a copy of the Everest Pinnacle report. I'll talk about that in a little bit. If you opt to go with the assessment, we would then step into a discovery where we go into a little bit more detail. My team would come together with bring all that information together through traditional analysis mechanisms using an accelerated version of our strategy roadmap. And then we would develop a customized plan for you. And some of the items, the thumbnails that you see down at the bottom of the page there, those are actual byproducts of a few of the assessments that we've done before. The second one, is a very high level process flow for an organization, shows a lot of the inefficiencies and the opportunities that they have for improvement. The two that are on the right-hand side of the page really deal with putting a multi-year kind of multi-pronged technology roadmap together. So typically we will identify multiple levers that the organization can go after as far as what they're going to what they will go after, what they'll pursue from a project standpoint. Our approach is a strong bias towards action. So when you look at those initiatives, right, a single line item can be its own project that could be, 6, 12, 14 months in length, right? And they're all tightly integrated, which you can see on the Gantt chart on the far right side, where you can see how the different technology strategies will come together, well, they'll become integrated and the organization will be more effective. Now, how do we know this works? Well, this is where the Everest Pinnacle report comes into play. So the Everest Group is a organizational consulting organization, and they have a this pinnacle roadmap that they go through, and it's a 65 question survey. We actually administered that survey to the C-suite executives of over 100 of our customers to get us the results actually that you see on the page right there. And the customers that are in that upper right-hand quadrant are in the pinnacle group. They are getting the most benefit out of their technology spend. And Everest has, in their report, you'll see Everest has stated that organizations that are in that pinnacle category are getting 1.7x return on their IT spend compared to everybody else. And it's a really compelling read if you're curious to say, how do I get more out of technology? When you think about all of the myths and the items that we talked about this morning so far, this is a really great backstop to all of that information, because it talks about how these organizations are set up. What are they doing? What are the really great companies doing? And what are the aspiring organizations doing and trying to do or need to do better up? And what's interesting when you climb inside this, when we went deep into the questions, roughly 50 to 60% of the questions in that survey are focused more on organizational issues, things like technical debt and organizational change management, and how the organization prepares itself to modernize. These are the things that separate these organizations. And I personally, when I think about the not-for-profit sector, this is an area where I think every single one of you has a leg up opportunity over the for-profit sector, because what I've seen with all of the nonprofits we've worked with is there's been a very strong focus on training and development of people. So I think this would be a really great read for all of you to share with your organization. But by clicking on the link up there, the QR code up there, we also have the URL down below. We will get you into the pipeline as we go forward. So let's wrap it up here. A little bit about Synoptek and our solution for nonprofits. We've done in the nonprofit sector, we've done over 200 projects. 200 specialists in a global setting. We are a Microsoft partner, and we did win Partner of the Year last year for the work that we did with the Shop Goodwill organization in their technology modernization. So we definitely have a great presence. We have over 1,100 employees around the globe. So we can provide all of the technical services that we talked about here. You can see a glimpse of a few of them on the left-hand side of the page here. And again, very strong Microsoft partner, but you can see there's a lot of non-Microsoft tools out there that we represent as well. A little bit about the company. The other thing, as I drift from the skills and qualifications, as I come over to here, we are headquartered in Southern California, but we do have 15 offices worldwide. So this gives us that opportunity to provide true 7x24x365 support for all of our customers. And we are an organization that is driven off of client satisfaction. So our CSAT scores are a 4.9 out of 5 overall. And we're focused on, a net promoter score of 50. When nonprofit is what we're talking about today, but the other sectors that we have focus on is right over here on the right side of the page. Now, tee up for this one. One of the last questions we got submitted that we did not answer, and for a very good reason. There was a question about, how are we seeing bias in AI being set up to help the nonprofit sector or not harm the nonprofit sector? And this is the webinar for that question to get asked. And we actually have forwarded it on to my friend Jay Can. Jay will be hosting this webinar coming up not too long from now, and Jay is focused on developing our not-for-profit or our overall artificial intelligence organization, and we'll be hosting this webinar. So we forwarded this question over to him. It's a challenge for you to click the link and register and hear the answer to that question if you're curious about it. All right. And I think with that, we are wrapping up. I think we've taken care of all the questions out there, but we will check and see if there are any other questions coming in. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody for your time this morning. On behalf of Mana and Elisa, myself, and the rest of the Synoptek marketing organization, we've enjoyed sharing this information with you, and we look forward to hearing from you after this event by clicking on the link. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jerry. At this time, we've addressed all the questions and answers. Thank you for your participation and excuse me, technical glitch. So thank you for your participation. And, you know, we really appreciate you joining our Beyond the Myths Mastering Not-for-Profit Technology Strategies. Hopefully you found this information we've shared valuable and insightful. If you are interested in taking advantage of one of the offers that Jerry just mentioned, either the free 60-minute technology session, would like access to the report, or, you know, doing the quick start roadmap, please go ahead and complete the form or reach out to us directly. If you have additional questions and would like to continue the conversation, we would love to do that with you. And just go ahead and reach out to us directly. We'd love to hear from you. Lastly, be sure to keep an eye out in your inbox for follow-up information on resources, the recording and deck, and the additional information related to this webinar. Until next time, take care and have a wonderful day.